All right. Welcome everyone to the Cluster Addons meeting. It is the 3rd of September. And it looks like we have two actions from last time. One was for Justin and the other one was for somebody else.
I can take my items first.
Yes, perfect.
I think the other ones are for Fabrizio, but I don't know who. They're both really for me, I guess. I have mostly been working on this Kube Builder PR and have not yet tried it out in COPS. That will hopefully happen in this 2-week sprint, I guess you'd call it. But the Kube Builder PR is trying to introduce the pattern as a plugin, is what we sort of decided. I thought it was going to go in, and then there's been some discussion around suitable gating, and it's not clear from our point of view that we gain a lot from being a PR. So I need to figure out do we gain a lot from being a plugin? I need to figure out what our what the installation story is going to be. If the installation story is sufficiently complicated, it doesn't seem like it's worth it. So we'd still use all the same machinery. We just, instead of installing a plugin and Kube Builder, you just install our thing. So that's what I need to follow up on with the Kube Builder folk to understand that. But I think the basic approach is there, and we just need to figure out what the best sort of user experience is.
Cool. And regarding COPS and the add-on installer, is it?
I haven't tried that.
Yes. But would it mostly be you who's interested in looking into this, or is there? Do you feel like
probably?
Yes. Is in general, like the COPS people, do they know of the general idea?
They know of the idea. They are very, very enthusiastic. It solves a serious problem for COPS, which is the co-packaging in the COPS binary of add-ons is problematic all around. Everyone wants it. Probably I would have to do the first one, but then I imagine once we open the floodgates, there will be a flood, which is why I do want to get the pattern working first.
Right. Okay, cool. Cool. Any questions about either of the two? Okay. Lee, the Kube ADM add-ons item, was it yours? Or is this something
Fabrizio was the person who left a bunch of feedback, and then I answered a bunch of questions on that document. And I saw just last night he actually left a bunch of responding comments. Most of them were in agreement. So I just kind of looked at the notification. Yeah, that is, sorry, I have to see if the document is linked in these notes. Yeah. So pretty much everything that I kind of commented about, Fabrizio got back to. And it doesn't look like there's any real dissent.
You also presented this in the Kube ADM meeting, right? So there was some discussion in the meeting.
Yeah. So the main thing we're really struggling on right now in Kube ADM is we've implemented some pretty buggy patterns with regard to component config and upgrading the versions of those component config. At some point, what got merged and was implemented and what is carried through for a few releases in Kube ADM is that we will transparently store like all of the component config versions in the cluster and all of the state necessary to recreate like what was intended on init, like through the upgrade process with upgraded API versions and all of that, without having the user do anything or know anything about those configs. And that gets into problems where like the user was relying on a default previously, then we serialized the default to an actual value, and then we tried to upgrade the value, and now you don't get the new default and those kinds of things. And it's just not a helpful pattern to be trying to use the cluster as an authoritative source of state when none of the locations where we're storing that state are documented, and it's not intended for users to be modifying it. And so kind of talking with Timothy, and like I also suggested to really just get rid of the pattern, and there's agreement. But it complicates things for add-ons.
Are you mostly talking about component config as used by Kubedium directly, or component config like for scheduler, for example?
So component config for scheduler is currently not used by Kubedium, but that's in scope for Kubedium at the moment. And it's currently working with the kube proxy and kubelet component configs.
But it is those component configs you're referencing here rather than the Kubedium configuration.
So those configs get wrapped up in the same multi-doc that is the Kubedium config.
Okay.
But there are other Kubedium config API types like init and join configuration and stuff like that. So all of those get serialized into the cluster and versioned, but they're used like as an authoritative source when they shouldn't be. The main UX that it got like that was trying to preserve was that when somebody did a Kubedium upgrade, they would not have to have the config. But that's a little that puts a lot of burden on the tool, right? So working through that problem and like how component config is supposed to be dealt with and like documenting that pattern has an effect on how the add-on install is configured, basically. And so that's what I'm working through with Ross. That's the major thing that we talked about, Daniel. As far as like timeline and stuff right now, you know, we're in 1.16 code freeze, and the release is looking pretty good. But the add-on install feature definitely needs to wait for 1.17 merge window for Kubedium at least.
I missed some of the details, but did you get the feeling that everyone sort of agreed on during the meeting on the UX and component config questions, or is it something you're still designing with or discussing with Ross somewhere?
With regard to the add-on installer like being the thing we want, for a couple of meetings now in the Kubedium call, there's like there's no approved design, but everyone intends for the feature to work and to be the way that we do things. So, because everyone agrees that we need a solution for similar reasons to why cops would, you know, need to pull all of the packaging out of the binary.
Okay. Any questions for Lee? Maybe as I haven't been part of the discussions, do you think we should start finding issues for this, or like what was the process? Is this going to take a couple more meetings to agree on everything? Yeah, for
refactoring some of the Kubedium behavior. Ross is working on these. We have some existing issues, and I actually don't know how much of it is going to make 1.16 either, because they're not really bug fixes. So just, yeah, the past week I've been focused on like CI signal. So that's I'm not in the loop with where implementation on making that cleaner is. But my plan still is like right now we just need like something in code that actually works. So that's what I'm working on. Like before a KEP or anything, I just need to see every stone that we need to turn over. I don't know.
Okay. Are there any more things you wanted to talk about or get out of this meeting? I think we also have a couple of new faces in the meeting as well.
Well, I can say hello. I've been following this process without attending the meetings, talking to Lee and Daniel and so on, but thought I'd show up for once. Actually, I was just having a Twitter conversation right now with about the kubectl apply from a URL being the new curl pipe bash. And this whole add-ons thing, I guess, should be an improvement on that, or should be marketable as an improvement on that.
We'll note you down as the marketing officer. Brilliant.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was sort of thinking, you know, what's the difference between curl pipe bash and apt-get install? And well, not a lot really, but it kind of comes down to whether you're checking checksums and whether you're checking checksums against some master that you trust. So when it comes to an add-on for core DNS, for instance, then we ought to kind of have the same pattern that we start with a symbolic name and then we go get a SHA of a Git SHA or a OCI SHA or something like that. So I think that then gives the same level of trust.
I agree with that. I think actually in the last working group, Kate's Infra, Phillips demonstrated a proof of concept of using certificate transparency logs to do some SHA authentic or some lightweight signing of SHAs. I think that there may be a different mechanism that we end up adopting, but rather than that particular mechanism. But the idea seems pretty solid, and I think there is movement. It will likely be slow movement, but slow movement towards getting some way of having the official, for some degree of official Kubernetes projects, like signed or some root of trust to a Kubernetes entity.
Yeah, signing obviously comes to mind, but I don't think it really changes anything. If you have a chain like you visiting the Kubernetes URL via TLS, yeah, signing is a different dimension. I mean, yeah, maybe we should do that as well. But
yeah, it would be good to, yes, to know that there are a lot of binaries that are not currently built by the Kubernetes in the Kubernetes release infrastructure, I think was what we should say. And so this is sort of part of getting that onto a more standardized or more reproducible and attested path, so that you know the binary you're getting is from the source, and the source followed the rules, Kubernetes rules, and so on. And you, in theory, could rebuild it yourself and get the same SHA.
Right. Yeah. So but of course, people that also want to install binaries from third-party suppliers, and so I guess we should.
I don't think anything would stop like Weave making their own root of trust as well, right? I think that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, but you end up with probably the same thing. Like the how do you install Docker instructions start with sort of 12 lines on how to get around apt-get security.
Well, how to install the key? Yes, I do agree with that point. But of course, we all phone each other offline or visit each other face to face and verify the key, right? Every time.
Yeah. It doesn't really matter. You know, the Windows thing. You know, click on this button to accept. Same pattern. Anyway, I'm very keen to get something. Yeah, I guess I'm very keen to put the simplest thing that could possibly work in people's hands to try out, because whatever we do, people are sure to be upset with it, or, you know, more charitably point out things that we didn't think of. So yeah, rather than us try and figure out everything, I think we should move forward small steps under alpha, experimental, whatever, and put it in people's hands and see what comes back.
I'll just point out that there is one marked difference between kubectl with a URL and curl pipe to bash, which is that even with even if you're curling with TLS and like you're going to the proper server, the server can perform a timing attack on bash, whereas it cannot really do that with kubectl. So basically, you could like curl something and then read it, and then if you pipe it that same exact URL to bash, the server can detect the latency of the shell and then start actually printing different commands than what you would actually print and read if you had not piped it through the shell. It's kind of interesting. But yeah, kubectl is not vulnerable to that because it has to serialize the entire file first. So it gets all of it at the same time. You can't discern that it's actually being used by kubectl. And that gets into the whole checksumming thing as well, which is like verifying you have the entire package before you decide to operate on it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But yeah, I thought the timing attack, when I saw a demo of that, it was really cool because yeah, you can see the server like, it's like, oh, it's taking a while for the first couple lines to be read through this streamed response body. Let's start changing what we print. And then the shell is now executing something that's different from what you read. So.
Cool. Anything else? Or shall we wrap up a bit early? In that case, thanks a lot, everyone, and see you again in 2 weeks. Bye.